Musk is under the microscope this morning. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the Securities and Exchange Commission is in fact probing Elon Musk's tweet to find out if it was truthful. This after the Tesla CEO tweeted 2 days ago this, "Am considering taking Tesla private at $420 a share. Funding secured." And with that, the stock rallied. Joining me right now is former SEC Chairman Harvey Pitt. Great to see you, Harvey. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Maria.
What do you think, as a former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, what is the SEC looking at? Tell us where you see potential wrongdoing here.
Well, the entire announcement was highly problematic and unprecedented, and it's important to realize it's not the medium, but it's the message. Going private transactions are usually announced in advance of the market opening or after the market closing. They're not announced in the middle of the day. Mr. Musk tweeted in the middle of the day. In addition, it's not the CEO who announces this, but it's the board. It's the company that makes this announcement. But here, it was the CEO. What's more important is he stressed that he already had funding to pay $420 a share. But no efforts have yet been done to find out whether it's in the shareholders' best interest to take the company private, and if so, at what price. So all of this raises two fundamental questions. First, was he trying to artificially influence the price of the stock? If he was, that would be manipulation. Second, does he really have the money in hand, and is it a binding commitment that would give him almost $70 billion in what would be the largest going private transaction in U.S. history? That would be fraud if those things were not true.
Okay, so the SEC then needs to better understand what he was referring to when he said $420 and funding secured. Where would that money come from?
Well, it could come from either a consortium of banks. It could come from a foreign sovereign investor. I mean, the company did receive a big cash infusion from Saudi Arabia the day that earnings were announced this past week. So it's possible that that kind of money might exist. It's a large amount, and it would take a great deal of effort to put it together, but it's not impossible.
Having said that, it's unwise to be tweeting about this in the middle of the day, creating activity in the stock. Do you think the SEC is also looking at that, given the fact that on the Saudi Arabia investment news, the stock, I guess, rallied right before this announcement? It was up 7% going into the tweet and then up 11% after the tweet.
It's definitely the wrong way to do this kind of thing. It may not be per se illegal, but it is definitely highly problematic, and it could be illegal depending on what his intentions were when he made the announcement.
So is there a deadline here, Harvey, in terms of when he would have to reveal his source of funding? I mean, if he says funding secured, does the SEC want an answer now in terms of whether or not it's secured, and how long does he have to come up with whatever deal he was referring to?
No, I think he is required to demonstrate that at the time of his tweet, he already had a legally binding commitment for $420 a share. That would be the requirement. So the SEC can request or subpoena documents asking for proof as to what his financing was and what the legal basis was for his suggestion that it was secured, which is a very strong term.
Very strong term. What's the penalty, Harvey, if Musk was just, I don't want to say lying, but coming up with an idea that perhaps wasn't necessarily intact, funding secured? What's the penalty?
Well, we don't, of course, know what the facts are yet, but the penalties are quite serious. If he committed fraud or manipulated the market, he would be liable both civilly for an extreme amount of damages, but also he could have potential criminal liability as well.
Why criminal?
Because almost every violation of the federal securities laws is both a civil problem that the SEC pursues and also a potential criminal issue that the Department of Justice pursues.
I see. And so when do you expect we'll hear more information about this? I mean, for example, when are we going to better have a clearer idea whether or not there was, in fact, funding in place?
I would believe that the next set of announcements will come at some point from Tesla itself. The company will probably organize a special committee of independent directors who will then indicate exactly where matters stand and whether they are going to pursue Musk's suggestion that the company go private. I don't think we will hear from the SEC until it has completed its investigation.
What about shareholder lawsuits, Harvey? Are you expecting that to also be an issue here? Because I know that the short sellers lost a lot of money on that as the stock went up, and that's basically what I assume Elon Musk wanted to do, because he's been sticking it to the shorts, and he's, you know, uncomfortable with some of the criticism that the company has received. You saw a very upsetting conference call recently where he pushed back on some of the criticism and the short sellers who were questioning about his burn rate. How much cash is he burning? So are you expecting shareholder lawsuits?
I think they are inevitable. It's just a matter of time before lawsuits are filed because of the enormous fluctuation in the price of the stock. I would think the shorts will bring a lawsuit against Mr. Musk and Tesla.
Is there any precedent here, Harvey? Have you ever seen something like this before?
I've never seen anything like this kind of announcement. I have seen short sellers sue certain companies, and I've certainly seen companies sue short sellers. It's a fact of life that if you're public, you're going to get criticism, and the shorts are people you just have to live with.
Right. And obviously that's what they're doing. They're critical of the company. They're shorting the stock. I mean, that's why they exist. So you're expecting the SEC to be asking questions about the funding. Any other questions coming from the SEC in your view?
Well, I think they will look into why the board didn't make an announcement sooner, why they waited for Mr. Musk to go forward, and I think they will also try to determine what kinds of behind-the-scenes activities were taken by the company.
So, in other words, background, because the board is saying yes, Harvey Pitt, the board is saying yes, that Elon Musk has discussed the potential of going private with us before, but there's no mention of any $420 price.
No, and where that price comes from is very hard to understand. It may be a very good price, but in terms of an economic analysis, it may turn out that it's not as good a price as should be paid for this company. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, when you're talking about $420 a share, that's like $70 billion, right? $75 billion?
Yes. Yes, an unprecedented amount of money. It truly is.
All right, we will leave it there. Harvey, it's great to see you again. Hope you'll come back soon. Thanks so much for your insights this morning.
Thank you.
Harvey Pitt joining us there.